Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast, where we take on the mission of unlocking the code of your genetics. This season is all about you, upgrading your health, not just on the surface, but down to the root cause. Join us as your clinicians at the DNA company investigate your DNA and beyond. The intention of this podcast is to enhance your lifestyle by changing what is in your control. This does not substitute the medical advice given by your personal doctor, therapist, and other healthcare professionals. Hey guys, welcome. We have a cool conversation today. I often get asked this question: what do I do for longevity? How do I live longer? What are the top 4 or 5 recommendations? And people ask me, what do I do? What do I see my colleagues and friends do that are in this biohacking space? And often, you get the usual suspects of red light and oxygen therapy and certain supplements. And my belief is there's so much you can do in your existing habits that are things that would fall in biohacking territory because we just don't do them anymore. That there's before jumping into where do I spend my tens of thousands of dollars, it's like, what can I do for free? What can I do that's something I'm already doing? Let's take a habit that I'm already doing and make it a better version of the habit. Let's take a structured part of my day and add or remove something that makes it better for me. And so I've laid out some of the top areas where there are things you're already doing. Let's just do them right. And if you do all of what we're going to talk about today, you will extend your life. If you don't do all of what we're talking about today, you will probably take years away. So that's how powerful these things are. As powerful as the red lights and the oxygen and all of these things, these daily habits in themselves will give you extended health span, not just lifespan. So what are these things? These are the things that, again, you focus on, prioritize, and get right. And they're easy. And the first one is sunlight. So why do I talk about sunlight? We are meant to live like cave people. Our body still thinks that we are cave people. And we are meant to wake up and get out. Our body is meant to get exposed to the sun in the morning. And what does that look like? Well, sunlight is a key trigger to tell your body what time it is. The different types of light during the different types of day. In fact, you probably know this feeling when you're waking up in the morning. You can kind of figure, is it 6 a.m., 7 a.m., or 8 a.m. based on what the sun looks and feels like. You already know. Intuitively, you know. So circadian rhythm drives every process in your body. Things need to start. Production of cortisol, hormone regulation, metabolism, all of these things are dependent on being done at the right time, which means your body needs to know what time it is, which means that body needs to start its jobs by getting sunlight on time. And for those of you that have a suboptimal BDNF or clock gene, this means even more. But sunlight also means vitamin D. It also means getting that key hormone, vitamin D, that drives 10% of biochemistry. You have 25,000 genes in your body that make up your genome, somewhere between 22 to 25,000. Around 2,500 of those genes need adequate vitamin D. And if you don't have it, this is why it means so much. Mood disorder, bone density loss, hair and skin, hormone regulation, it affects everything. A really cool thing about the way we're supposed to get sunlight. It was meant to happen in the morning when you get up, and then you get back home and you're going to eat and you're going to take a break during that peak sun. We aren't meant to be outside so long, and you go back out to do other things. That was the typical structure of the day. And those 2 periods of being awake and out in the morning prior to 10 a.m. and in the evening after 4 p.m. is when the sun gives you a high dose of red light. Red light, very specifically, repairing your mitochondria, giving you massive anti-aging benefits, and extending your lifespan. And you can get it directly from the sun if you're out during these 2 windows, before 10 a.m. and after 4 p.m. So that's number 1. Number 2, there's something to be said about pausing and giving your brain a break. And a great biohack that most biohackers do that they don't talk about because it's not something that they're selling is meditation. Why is it so important? In order to heal anything, in order to fix anything, in order to be a better version of yourself at any time, your body needs to be in a rest and recovery state. Given today's reality, a lot of us all the time are in a fight or flight. Fight or flight is a response to trauma, fear, that adrenaline rush that happens when you need to run and deal with something, as opposed to being on a vacation in a hammock regenerating. So, being stuck in fight or flight is a reality for us today. One of the most powerful tools to break that is to meditate, to deep breathe, to focus. And in fact, this is a state where you'll actually experience neurogenesis. If you focus on anything for 5 minutes and that calm, which we never do, we're constantly ADHDing ourselves and jumping around. But if you were to spend 5 minutes hyper focus on one thing, your brain actually starts to develop new neurons and new neural pathways to keep itself young and healthy. So imagine the power of that to actually regenerate the brain and keep it young, because there's no sense aging without a healthy brain. Today's dementia wave is bigger than ever before, partly because of all the causes, environmental toxins, hormones, also because we're living longer. We're living into our late 70s and some of us into our 90s and sometimes 100. And with those same exposures, the brain is degenerating quicker. And so you're living longer with bad brain health. Meditation is the opposite of that, driving neurogenesis, driving good brain health. And you can incorporate in that meditation breath holding. Breath holding is a very important exercise that drives mitochondrial function. It's a tool that some mitochondrial practitioners will actually prescribe to people. Go hold your breath on a daily basis. And in fact, if you can get up to a 3 minute breath hold, you're going to get into a territory where you have crazy stem cell production. After 3 minutes, which sounds like a lot, but you can get there. Let me give you an example. Kate Winslet, who's the star of the Titanic, co-star with Leonardo DiCaprio, needed to learn how to hold her breath for 7 minutes, and she did it. So she, as an actress who is part of her vocation, had to learn how to do this. 3 minutes shouldn't be a challenge for us. It just requires practice. So getting up to 3 minutes means stem cell production. So meditation plus breath holding is another major biohack that you can do for free that will heal your brain, give you stem cells, and keep you younger. Number 3, this one requires you to really prioritize your time and potentially change the culture around you, potentially change the context, potentially seek support of those around you to allow you to do this. When you look at the people of Okinawa, Japan, who are one of the many blue zones around the world, where people generally live over 100, very common for people to get to 110, 115. You'll find that they have this common practice that they call ikigai. Ikigai means sense of purpose. Sense of purpose means that there's no sense of retirement, and not necessarily in your job, but also in your role in the community. So there is the person who walks the kids to school. There is the person that picks up dangerous things from the playground. There is the person that makes sure everybody's doorstep is swept and clean. Everybody has an integral role in the fabric of the community, and they never stop doing it. And so they wake up every day with a sense of purpose. I need to get this done because the community is dependent on me. And as we age, we don't do this. First of all, we aren't integrated, we're separated. And second, we think of our role as the work that we do. Perhaps our parenting, perhaps dealing with our parents, but we don't think of it as communal. And that communal sense of purpose is a tool that you'll often see in places where people live a long time, because it keeps you in a place of love and oxytocin, as opposed to a place of materialism, competitivism, and priorities that are around the next thing we're going to talk about, stress. It's the opposite. Now, stress being number 4, there was a study that was done by Harvard where they tried to identify, if they were to look at centenarians, people that lived over 100, and they were to try to figure out what's that one thing that all these people did. What was that unique thing that we wouldn't think of, that we found as a common trend? And so they did this research, and they found that all of these people seem to have a very low number of very high quality relationships. A less number of people around them, but the people that are around them were providing them love and quality as opposed to toxicity. Why did this matter? This led to a reduced stress level. Stress is a silent killer in the background where you can take as many molecular hydrogen tablets as you want, sit in the oxygen therapy as much as you want. If you're going back to a life of stress and toxicity, stress and bad relationships are a toxin. They will drive cortisol. They will cause inflammation. Your skin will not feel good. You will get headaches. Your immune system will be compromised. It is a slow, silent killer. And you'll find that in the jurisdictions where people live longer, or in the scenarios where people live longer, they have a low number of very high quality relationships. It's very hard to do this with a high number of relationships and finding that quality. So, this is proven over and over again. And going back to the other thing I said, having a sense of purpose is partly what drives us. So, these two things are interconnected. Sense of purpose means that you're around the people that need you on a daily basis, and that's fairly consistent. So, stress in general, whether it is from the relationships or the work that you do, is a major driver of aging and cellular degradation. Another source of stress is, and the big one, is frustration and loss of control. We find that so many people who are stuck in a stress response where it is feeding their disease are also stuck in a scenario where they either work for somebody or have a relationship or have a context where they don't control it. And that loss of control frustrates them. And that frustration leads to stress and it leads to anger. And that's the state they're then in. And the body doesn't like to heal in that state. Fight or flight, once again. So the key to all this stress is to not be in fight or flight. The key to unwinding it is to not be in fight or flight. Very important to self-regulate, check in, go back to the meditation, unwind it. The opposite of stress is meditation. The opposite of the inflammation caused to your cells by cortisol is meditation. It is the antidote, it is the solution. So, in as much as you would structure your life, your relationships to avoid it, you also have a healing tool which is free and easy, which means locking yourself in a room, removing every thought from your head, and hyper focusing on one thing until the noise of the world is eliminated from your mind. And doing that for 10 minutes. 5 minutes will get you to a state of neurogenesis, new brain cells, and then another 5 minutes of that is giving you the actual utilization of that time and the development of those neural brain cells. So that is another key proponent of why certain people live longer, which you'll consistently see. This leads us to fight or flight, which we've already mentioned a couple times now, but a very important consideration because the body just doesn't heal. So why do I signal this out? It's your nervous system. Another major biohack that is potentially free or low cost in terms of dealing with it, but very difficult to be truly healthy and age with grace and get the benefit of those longevity hacks that you're spending so much money on if your nervous system is struggling. And I can tell you, of the people that I deal with, I have some VIP clients that I coach that work with me directly over and over and over and over again. The people that are stuck, that this just isn't working. I'm doing exactly what you said, it didn't work. Their nervous system needs help. You'll often find that something that often does work for people and is across the board a standard doesn't work on them. Why? The terrain isn't ready to heal. The terrain is not saying right now, let's go fix something. Whatever you input, if you input fasting, for example, it doesn't take it as a biohacking anti aging signal. It takes it as an acute stress signal and it goes into a shock or a freeze. We've seen people go manic from doing things that often heal other people because their nervous system just isn't ready. So it becomes one of the top priorities and something you deal with. And how do you deal with your nervous system? Goes back to some of the stuff we said, dealing with meditation, dealing with breath holding. But ultimately, it's addressing the vagus nerve. So there's ways to deal with the vagus nerve through frequency, through vibration, and signal frequency of calm back into the nervous system so that the vagus nerve thinks that things are okay. Ultimately, the brain doesn't know what's happening. The brain doesn't know and isn't telling you what's going on. The brain is relying on you to tell it what's going on. The brain is relying on your thoughts, the thoughts in your head, the thoughts in your gut, and the thoughts in your heart. There's neural cells in your heart and neural cells in your gut, all communicating back up to the brain. And this leads us to the next one, which is part and parcel why this matters and why the nervous system sometimes can be dysregulated. You have a direct bidirectional communication pathway between the brain and the gut. The gut is constantly telling the brain what's happening. And if you have dysbiosis or gut dysregulation, it's constantly giving your brain bad news. And your brain is constantly in a fight or flight state where the nervous system, the thing we just talked about, is struggling because it thinks it's supposed to be in battle mode fighting stuff when really the gut itself is the priority and it's jurisdictional. It's in that one location. Meanwhile, the entire body bears the brunt of the fight or flight because the gut is telling the brain that's what's going on. So, how do we deal with the gut? Well, we know that we have to be very careful about food. And what does that mean? 95% of America, according to the CDC, is now metabolically unhealthy, borderline diabetic. There's only 5% of Americans that are actually metabolically healthy and not on the path to diabetes. That includes children, by the way. 60% of children are now metabolically dysfunctional, unheard of in previous generations. So if you look at the habits of people that live long in the cities where they live long, you're going to see certain consistent trends. And if I use the Japanese, I can give you an example of what they do. The Japanese consistently in Okinawa eat purple sweet potato. Why does this matter? Purple sweet potato is rich in anthocyanin, which is a potent antioxidant. Antioxidant meaning keeping the cells young and healthy and reducing the effects of oxidative stress. So you can use foods with antioxidants to reduce oxidative stress if you're eating the good stuff, not the mass-produced commercial stuff. Purple sweet potato is a carb. It's full of carbohydrates. The opposite of what you hear from a lot of people, don't eat carbs. Eat them, but eat the good ones and eat them in the right volume. You don't have a loaded plate of rice or you don't have a sub sandwich that is a giant log of bread. You have the right amount and the right quality. The people of Okinawa, Japan also eat fermented foods daily. They have miso, which is fermented soy, on a daily basis. So the gut is getting fed probiotic bacteria to keep it healthy so that the immune response is constantly dealing with all the stress of viruses, pathogens, cancers, and all of what the immune system needs to deal with. So they regularly eat fermented foods, which, if you look ancestrally at any civilization, this was true everywhere. We don't do this today. This is a major problem, something that's missing from our diet is fermented food, and it needs to be added back. The other thing you'll see the people from Okinawa, Japan eating is seaweed. On a regular basis, they eat seaweed. Why does that matter? Minerals. Seaweed, sea moss, all these sea plants are really rich in minerals. And these minerals are structurally what our body depends on. And in fact, if you're fasting, you can get rid of fat, you can get rid of protein, you can get rid of calories, and the body doesn't mind. But if you get rid of minerals, the body starts to think that you're going into starvation and it'll start to store fat. To give you a simple example, we think of our bone as calcium, when in fact there's 61 minerals that make up our bone. So the diversity is important, the volume is important, and the sourcing is important. Why is it so important? Because the plants that we think give us our minerals are being grown in soil that is heavily sprayed and dead, which means that it's not having the nutrient value, it is filler. So you need to go find the foods that actually give you the minerals, or you need to supplement with minerals. The other thing they eat is protein. They eat healthy omega 3s and protein every day. So those are two separate things, but they're constantly eating high levels of protein through seafood, through fish, which is fueling their muscle. It's very difficult to stay young and healthy if your muscle is not adequate. Your glucose is metabolized through your muscle. So it's very hard to be metabolically healthy if you don't have muscle mass. They are physically active with that protein, and so they're also driving the retention of muscle because of their habits. And so protein becomes very important. And the last one is the omega 3, which you'll also consistently find in jurisdictions where people live a long time, that they're getting a lot of high quality omegas, which is good for the heart, which is good for the brain, which is good for structural components, linings of the body, and they're getting it through seafood. So, understanding the food habits of longevity zones means you're not adding an expensive biohack, you're replacing an existing habit you have to eat anyway. You might as well eat the foods that drive longevity. You also need to remove certain foods. What are the things that make you sick? Well, oxalates, which are so prolific in our food supply, these little oxalic acid crystals that are found in things like spinach, kale, and almonds that wreak havoc on the gut because they're literally like little glass shards entering your gut tract, ripping the gut lining apart, causing leaky gut, which leads to disease. The same thing is true of seed oils. The same thing is true of glyphosates. Take in seed oils which have linoleic acid in them. The gut lining is not a single wall. It is a bunch of what we call tight wall junctions. They look like little Lego pieces that can connect or separate. So the gut is selectively permeable. It decides what can pass through the gut wall. And things like oxalates, things like seed oils, things like linoleic acid, things like glyphosate will cause those tight wall junctions to separate and lead to leaky gut. This is a direct connector to chronic disease and aging. Leaky gut equals disease. Leaky gut equals inflammation. Leaky gut equals disease. Leaky gut equals leaky brain, poor brain health. So, very important to consider what's going in and use this as a tool. What do I add that is an anti aging longevity hack? What do I remove that will slowly age me and kill me? Then we look at fasting. And fasting is an area where there's some controversy around what needs to be done. And where does this controversy come from? As always, the research is done on young men, and we then try and apply it to women. And women that are intermittent fasting daily, that are estrogen dominant, don't necessarily get the same outcome. In fact, they often get the wrong outcome. Why? Because a fasting male who is androgenized enters a warrior response. I am going into battle and I'm going to get everything I need to survive. A fasting woman who is going into a fasting response with estrogen dominance is going to go into a warrior response, protect the tribe and store fat. The exact opposite of what your intention is. So, although fasting is a must for everybody, how you do it is very important and differentiated by your hormones. Also, when you do it, women shouldn't necessarily fast in the last week of the menstrual cycle. The body needs to stay away from starvation. In fact, you might want to add additional carbs that you may avoid in the beginning of part of the month during that time. The need for nutrition is very different. And what do you get from fasting if you do it properly? This word autophagy that we hear about, where the body is healing itself, regenerating. So that break in metabolic function allows for cellular repair to happen. We also know that if you do longitudinal fast as opposed to intermittent daily, but you do 24-hour, 48-hour, 72-hour, after 24 hours of an empty gut, your body will start to produce stem cells specifically in the gut. So it's going to start to repair the gut lining itself. Beautiful outcome of a beautiful practice of getting a many thousands of dollars stem cell treatment for free because you made them yourself. And this is another reason why once in a while doing a long-term fast. And if you look at some of the teachings around fasting that are more balanced, you'll see go ahead and eat your 3 meals a day, several days a week, and you may intermittent fast twice a week, and you may completely fast for 24 hours once a week. And so that's a more balanced approach. Although there's extremes within that, like the 24-hour fast, you're still getting your multiple days of fueling yourself through multiple meals. And that balance the body seems to like more. Then we get into sleep. If you talk to any biohacker, longevity expert, functional medicine doctor, and you say, where do I start? They typically will tell you, you have to sleep. If you're not sleeping, none of this matters because that's when repair happens. That's when regeneration happens. That's when, in the first half of your sleep, the lymphatic drainage of the brain and the removal of brain toxins, the lymphatic drainage of the body and the removal of body toxins, the glutathionization and driving of antioxidation toxins that are in your blood and sending them to the liver to clear. That all happens in your sleep. Then the second half of your sleep is preparation. Let me make hormones, let me make neurochemicals, let me get everything that I need to be ready for the next day. If you're not sleeping properly, this doesn't happen. We use genetics to determine what is disrupting your sleep. It's not always the same answer for everybody. Sometimes it's the first thing we talked about, circadian rhythm, and just waking up on time and exercising on time and getting sunlight on time may be the thing that helps you fall asleep on time. For some people, it's more about being not being able to stay asleep, the distraction of stimulus and how that may wake you up. And so all of a sudden, there's personalization around what sleep disruption means. And if you start to get it right, your sleep is great. And if your sleep is great, your hormones are great. Your detoxification is great. Your testosterone levels and everything you need to be ready for the next day is great. Your brain starts to feel a little sharper. You start to lose fat, a cascade of multiple outcomes of doing one thing right. The last thing I would talk about, which requires a lot of personalization, but is still true for everyone, is detoxification. There's practices around understanding that you live in an environment that is very unlike what your ancestors, even if you go one generation back, it is not the same. We are chock full of toxic exposure on a daily basis, from mold to chemicals to EMF to toxic food to hormone disruptors. So, simply doing the work of removal before even what supplement do I take, what food do I eat, what exercise do I do. We're talking today about what are the things we can do that are free. Simply getting rid of and understanding what the threats are, causing the relief. There's no such thing as detoxification without removing the toxin to begin with. So, even doing something as simple as going to the Environmental Working Group website, which is a non for profit, and learning everything that's in your home that's making you sick and getting rid of it. As simple as understanding how to mitigate EMF in your home, turning the Wi Fi off while you sleep. As simple as looking at your cleaning products and understanding which ones are toxic and which ones aren't. As simple as understanding every single thing in your home that has a fragrance and the total accumulation of them that is far more burdensome than the body can handle. In fact, there was a study that just came out of Holland that said that today's indoor air quality of Western countries is 4 to 5 times worse than the outdoor air quality now. Air quality, sorry. So you go outside and you think that the pollution is what you need to avoid, but all the fragrances, mold, toxins, chemicals, and everything you're using in your home in a drywall box that doesn't breathe is now making your indoor air quality 4 to 5 times worse than the pollution you breathe outside. So, step one to detoxification is getting rid of the toxins. And that is something you can do for free. That is something that you can do very quickly. And it is something that will dramatically change your longevity trajectory. So these things that we talked about today did not require you going and spending thousands of dollars, did not require you learning something new, did not require you reading a book or a manual, understanding how to do it. These are simple habits that are already what you're doing. You're just going to do them better. You're going to have better relationships with the right people. You're going to alter your food so it incorporates all of what you need. You're going to pause to breathe a couple times. You're going to remove and not you're not even talking about adding or hacking. It's like, what do I get out of my house that's making me sick? You're going to take your sleep and prioritize and focus and use your DNA to figure out what are the things that are disrupting my sleep and hyper prioritize those. And you start to get these things right, and you realize that good health was already there. I was already healthy. It's the bad choices I made that caused me the inflammation, caused me the metabolic dysfunction, caused me to feel not so well. And within the same habits, the same choices I have to make every day, I'm just making choices that are based on different priorities. As opposed to the flavor, it's about the nutrient value. As opposed to the convenience, it's about the cleanliness. As opposed to the fun, it's about the timing of the sleep. So all of these priorities drive different decisions. Those different decisions within the habits we talked about today will change your health span. If you do everything we said today, you will be a different version of yourself. And it is that simple. So, with that, I leave you with the top biohacks that are free, that you can do on your own, that you don't need to buy anything, that you don't need anyone's help with, that will truly change your life.